a bit hard, but then it is not advisable to give pigs that are of different ages, that are at different stages, the same feed, especially if they do not have the same nutritional requirements. Because if they are requiring different amounts of protein, how do you make one common feed for them? Now, this is what our first question is about. Our first question says that, can you help with a single feed formulation suitable for both mama and baby pig, since some of us don't have a separate room for crib feeding? So this person wants to make a single feed that can be given to both the crib feeders and the sow. With the reason for this being that he has just a single pen for the sow and there's nowhere for the little ones to be so that he can feed them separately. Now, to answer his question, what I would say is that making a single feed formulation for lactating sow and fresh piglets, that's the crib feeders, is not possible. Why? Because the lactating sow and the crib feeders have different nutritional requirements. So for little piglets at the crib stage, they need a good protein content between 20 to 22%, with the recommended levels being 22%. And for the lactating sow, it needs a crude protein content of about 16 to 19%. And for this 16 to 90% crude protein, we know that sows that are having their first litter or second litter need a higher amount of the proteins, between 18 to 19%. And then the multiparous sows, those that have more than 2 liters, need a much lower crude protein content, that is between 16 to 17.5%. Now, for the fiber content, crib feeders do not need so much fiber, the same as lactating sows. Crib feeders need very little amount, maybe between 2 to 3%. That is okay for them. And then the lactating sow also needs a very small amount, between about 3 to 4%. Now, what is common for them is that these two groups, the crib feeders and the lactating sow, need feed that contains a high amount of energy. They also need enough amino acids to be able to grow well. That is for the crib feeder. And then for the lactating sow to be able to recover from its body condition and then also be able to produce enough milk. Now, remember that for little piglets, the purpose of our crib feed is to provide the piglets with easily digestible ingredients, because we are trying to encourage the little piglets to consume feed early. And then we are also trying to train their gut to be able to digest the feed better, because mind you, they were feeding on only milk. They have enzymes that are able to break that milk down. Now with crib feed, we are introducing them to some form of solid feeding so that when they move on to the next stages, they'll be able to consume feed better. And this is very different from the purpose of lactation feed. Lactation feed is mainly to provide high energy for the sow to be able to produce enough milk and also to recover from its body condition. Now for crib feed, the ingredients you have to use are your carbohydrates and your protein ingredients. You don't have to add any fiber ingredients, because the little fibers that are in the carbohydrates and then the protein ingredients is enough. We just need about 2% fiber. So we don't need to add any actual fiber ingredients like the maize bran, wheat bran, and so on. But then for the lactating feed, you need your carbohydrate source, you need your protein source, and then you also need your fiber source. Do you get it? So due to these differences, we can't make a single feed for the crib feeders and for the lactating sow. But then this is what you can do. Since your major issue is the fact that you don't have a separate room for your piglets, I recommend that in the area where your sow is, just you can use wood or just a slab to demarcate a small portion of the room where the piglets can go. Then you make a small entrance where only the piglets can pass through. Then you put their feed there. So they just go there to feed. They come back out and then feed on the milk from the sow as well. So maybe you can implement that to help you. But then for a single feed formulation, that is not possible. Now let's move to our next question. So I have all the questions here handwritten. The next question says that, could you please mix with broken rice, rice bran, and granite cake? That is with respect to feed formulations. Can we use rice, rice bran, and granite cake? Now, to answer this question, what I have to say is you can use any ingredient at all to make your feed formulations. Now, for people that have consulted me, I've made several feed formulations for them using the ingredients that are available in their country, from sesame cake to cottonseed cake to a lot of ingredients. Now note that before you can use any ingredients to make a feed formulation, there are three important things that you should know. One, you should know the category that that ingredient falls under. So when I say category, I mean, is that ingredient a protein? Is it a carbohydrate? Is it a fiber? Is it a fat ingredient? And then number two, you have to know the nutritional information of that ingredient that you want to use in your feed formulation. So mainly you have to know the crude protein content of that ingredient, the crude fiber content of the ingredient, the amino acids present in that ingredient, and the energy content of that ingredient as well. Now, this will guide you in your feed formulation. Now, the third thing is that you have to ensure that after adding that ingredient to your feed formulation, the final feed formulation meets the nutritional requirements of whatever stage of pigs that you are making that feed for. So if you're able to get these three things right, you can make any feed formulation with whatever ingredients that you have. Just keep on adjusting the percentages of the ingredients and then checking the final nutritional content of that feed formulation till it matches with the requirements of the pigs. So now let's move on to our third question. The person is asking, how did you calculate DCP, that is the dicalcium phosphate, premix, toxin binder, enzymes, and salt in a feed formulation? So generally for additives, we don't just add them to the feed. Adding additives to your feed is based on the type of ingredients that you use in your feed formulation, and then also based on the stage of your pigs. Now let me explain it further. So basically for additives, there's no formula for calculate the amount required because it will vary based on the two factors that I've mentioned. So if you don't calculate, how would you determine the amounts that you need in a feed? Now let's look at how to determine the amount of premix that you need in a feed. For premixes, the amounts that you have to use is dictated by the manufacturing company. So for, let's say, company A, they can tell you that for 100 kilograms of lactating feed, use 4 kilograms of premix based on these ingredients. So if you're using maize, this, use this amount of premix in the feed for your lactating sows. Do you get it? So they give you the kilograms that you're supposed to use in your feed based on the stage of your pigs and then also based on the ingredients that you are combining. Now also for dicalcium phosphate, the companies also recommend the amounts that you should use. But then you yourself, if you know you are including other ingredients that are rich in phosphorus, like soya beans, and also you're adding ingredients like limestone, which has calcium, then you know that you may meet the calcium and phosphorus requirements and you would not have to add DCP to your feed. So based on the ingredients that you are using for your feed, you use the corresponding amount of dicalcium phosphate. So the next additive we mentioned is toxin binder. So how do you know the amount of toxin binder you should use in your feed? Now remember that we are adding toxin binder to bind any toxins, mycotoxins that may be present in the feed, right? So if your feed has no toxins, then you have no business with toxin binder. If you know that it was stored properly during transportation, everything was perfect, and your feed is toxin free, there's no need to add toxin binder. But then if your feed contains some toxins, from multiple experiments, the recommended amount of toxin binder to add to your feed ranges between 50 grams to 80 grams per 100 kilograms of feed. Now, someone may ask, what if I don't know if my feed has toxins or not? If you're not sure if your feed has toxins or not, the best thing to do is to just add a toxin binder. This will not have any effect on your pigs. It will not be harmful to them. The toxin binder will just pass through the body of the pig and come out. If there are no toxins for it to bind to, because basically it binds to the toxins and then carries them out of the body of the pig. So if there are no toxins, it will just pass through the body of the pig just like that freely and come out without harming the pig. However, toxin binder may cause problems if you use high dosages or high amounts of it in your feed. It may cause digestive issues for your pigs. So remember to stay within range, the 50 to 80 grams. Don't use too much of toxin binder in your feed. So the next ingredient he mentioned is enzymes. So we know that enzymes are basically to help break down complex carbohydrates, proteins, and fibers, and then help the pig absorb and utilize these nutrients for growth. And so I've been recommending that if you are using ingredients like spent grains, PKC, and then other non-conventional ingredients, they have complex nutrients like insoluble fibers and all that. So you have to add enzymes to the feed. Now, how much enzymes do you need in your feed? Manufacturing companies recommend the amount of enzymes needed in a certain amount of feed based on certain ingredients in the feed formulation. So from multiple sources, the most recommended amount of enzymes is about 100 grams in 100 kilograms of feed. So the next additive he mentioned is salt. Salt is basically added to the feed to improve the taste of the feed. And then this will help your pigs to eat more. And once they're eating more, they'll drink more water. Mostly, the recommended amount of salt to add to your feed ranges between 300 grams to as high as 1 kilogram per 100 kilograms of feed. Now, let's move on to our next question. It says that, thanks a lot for your lecture. Okay. My only problem is cassava meal. Is it in fresh form or gari or just dried it? I am confused. Please help. So this person is asking about cassava meal. How do you process it to add to your feed? So please, not in the fresh form. It's a no-no. Do not give fresh cassava to your pigs. I know a lot of people do it, but I'm here to debunk that practice. Now, fresh cassava is toxic. It contains a compound called cyanide. Now, this cyanide binds to the intestines of your pigs, the intestinal walls of your pigs, and then it will not allow your pig to absorb the nutrients that are present in the feed. Do you get it? So it's like your feed will be going to waste. Now, this cyanide, which is very harmful, can affect the thyroid glands of your pigs, leading to goiter. It will also lead to slow growth of your pigs since they are not able to utilize the nutrients present in the feed. It can cause several illnesses and also even lead to death. You can either feed cassava whole, you can give the whole cassava to your pigs, or you can just use only the peels as feed for them. Now note that the peels have a concentrated or a higher amount of cyanide in them. Now for both the whole cassava and the peels, to use them, you have to process them to get rid of this cyanide. And how do you process them? There are three different ways by which you can remove the cyanide from the cassava before giving to your pigs. Now the three methods are boiling, fermentation, and then sun drying. So for boiling, the boiling process helps to lower the amount of cyanide that is present in your cassava. This is because when you boil, the bonds that are present in the cyanide break up, and so it is liberated and you're able to get rid of the cyanide from your cassava. And then you can then feed the boiled cassava to your pigs. Now, the process of fermentation and sun drying are combined. This is the most effective method for getting rid of a higher amount of the cyanide content. Fermentation followed by sun drying. Now, you ferment the cassava for about 3 days. Some grind the cassava first before fermentation. So, you ferment it for about 3 to 5 days. And then after that, you sun dry it for about 3 to 5 days too. And then you go ahead to grind it again to break it up, and then you can mix that with your feed. Now the fermentation process also helps break up the bonds that are present in the cyanide, and so it is then precipitated in the water. So when you get rid of the water, you are getting rid of some amount of the cyanide. Now when you follow up by sun drying, the sun drying process also removes some amounts of the cyanide, making your cassava less toxic. So after processing your cassava, now you have your cassava meal. So then you can add your other ingredients and your additives to it to get a good feed formulation for your pigs. So if you want a feed formulation incorporating cassava meal, you can check out my other videos. I've made feed formulations incorporating cassava meal into pig's feed. So now let's move on to our next question. Our next question says that, if you have experience of azola feeding process, kindly make a video on that. So for this question, I'm going to pin it somewhere. I think I mentioned in my previous video that we are going to have an experiment on azola feeding versus formulated feeds for pigs. So that experiment is coming up on this channel. We'll be using pigs of almost the same age. We'll feed one batch only azola. We'll feed another batch formulated feed. And then we'll feed a third batch a combination of azola and our formulated feed. And then we'll do the comparisons and see which is better or which will give us the best results. So let's move on to our next question. There are several questions in my comments over the years that I think if I bring it on here to address, it will be helpful. And so if this session has proved helpful and you enjoyed it, kindly let me know in the comment section so that I can continue making these question and answer sessions for you. And so let's end here and I'll see you in the next video. It's a bye for now. Bye bye.